You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box, where we are not afraid to tackle your toughest questions. Today I have with me Kim Millette, therapist at Therapy Utah. And Kim, today we are going to be talking about how couples, sometimes one couple in the relationship can feel unseen or unheard. And so really appreciate you being here, and we'll just dive right into the question. So the question is, lately I've been feeling like I'm not being heard or seen in my marriage. My partner makes decisions without asking me, and when I try to share my thoughts or concerns, it feels like they're brushed aside. How can I address this feeling of being overlooked without creating conflict? Okay. Where do you want to start?
All right. Well, we're going to start with this weird world called power dynamics in marriage. So we don't. Couples won't even know what that means because they haven't heard it unless you're a therapist. But this is actually a big deal. And it's about the structure that we have going on in marriage. So let me tell you what it feels like to have an equal feeling power dynamic. That's going to look like you do feel seen. It's felt in your body. You feel heard. You're listened to. You collaborate on your issues, on your schedules. Right? You on decision making, you both feel like you have a voice. That's a big one. And that you both feel like you have each other's interest in mind. Whenever you start being pitted against each other, you are trying to be right over the other person, you get in this power dynamic fight, and you don't recognize that we're fighting for power. And what we want to get back to is trying to be in partnership with one another. Okay.
So that's really helpful. We're saying, okay, this is what it looks like to be actually in partnership. You know, some of those things, your schedule and what matters to you matters to me. What are some common reasons people start to feel unseen or unheard?
I think it's just part of marriage. When you get married, we're young. Okay, we've grown up in different families, and so we have different programming.
Right.
And so those people who have that equal power dynamic, they've earned it. They've worked, right? But a lot of times that's happened because we have courage to bring up what doesn't feel good to us, and then we brought it up in a way that's caring enough, that doesn't make the other person feel like they've been jabbed, right? And the other person listens and holds space and has some curiosity, and they care about what you're saying. And so when this is kind of the habit going on from the beginning, this equal partnership comes about, but it's earned. It doesn't happen from the beginning because we're going from a one-person system where you just have to worry about yourself, and you're graduating to a two-person system, and that takes learning and growth. And a two-person system is this ability to still hold all your feelings and concerns your own while not dropping your partners. And you learn how to value them almost equally. Whatever your partner values, you do too. And so it's something that is learned.
That's really interesting to hear you say. It's actually like we're going from a single person system to a multiple person, right? Not multiple, but two person system, right? We have not operated in the world that way. So when we partner with somebody, then that is what we are changing. And what I appreciated that you said is we're not getting rid of our own feelings and saying, okay, everything that matters to you, and I'm just dropping my own personality and my needs, but we're saying I'm holding space for my needs and the things that matter to me, and I'm holding space for yours. Both things matter, but balancing those.
Yes, and that's not easy to balance all the time. And I do that with couples. I hold my hands. We're both holding our hands in front of us, right? Just saying, I learned to orient to the world as a two-person, as a we, instead of just a me.
Yeah.
Right? And much easier for people who had that example in their homes, right? If that worked out really well and seemed easy in your home, then it's going to be easier for you.
Yes.
We call that kind of, you have more of a secure functioning. So you have, and secure means you just feel more secure in relationships, both your relationship with yourself and the relationship with others. So that is just going to be easier than somebody who didn't grow up with that, where they didn't see that secure functioning, where parents did that, balance that well together. Or you didn't even get your own, that relationship, the secure relationship, wasn't in maybe the relationship with your own parents, and so you have a little bit more insecurity, less confidence in relationships in general. But again, I want to point out that's really normal to also have that. So neither one's normal. The other one's a little bit luckier.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? The other one's a little luckier, but neither one are normal, right?
Right.
And I would think, I remember when my husband and I first got married, saying, we both came into this marriage with deficits. We both came in with strengths, but we both saw good things in marriage, and we both saw things that were not helpful and that we don't want to bring into our own marriage. And so understanding that and starting to say, okay, it's not that I'm right and you're wrong, but it's saying, wait a minute, we both have things to learn. And neither one of us have been in a 2-system partnership before, ever. So it's actually like a learning thing, right? I remember when we first went to couples therapy, we went, and I remember the therapist saying, like, what's going on? And I remember saying to him, we're good, but I think we could be great. And I want to be great. If why wouldn't we utilize tools and education to be great? And it was almost like it took him aback a little bit, like, wait a minute, there's no major, but that mindset of like, no, I actually want this to be great. And I want to come into this relationship knowing that I'm not perfect, neither is he, but I want to work on this. So I think that is a way of thinking, and I'm not saying everyone needs to be that way, but it was something that really benefited us as we started, because it really put us in a place of learners. We were both learners.
Well, and when you're both learners, notice the power dynamic there. Equality.
Yes.
Right? As soon as the couples start getting into that, grabbing power, and there's so many different ways to do this, and we'll talk about that. You're having, again, I totally know you all don't know this is what's happening, but you're having a power issue, and you're trying to get your power back, because when you don't feel like you have power in the relationship, you feel powerless.
Yep.
You feel helpless. And but you are just operating about when you can sit down with yourself and think why, and figure out what are my own emotions, what are my own needs, what's going on, and what might be going on with them. You're establishing some equality when you just have curiosity. If you are just into your own hurt feelings, your own insecurities, there's a good chance that you're in a one-person system.
And having that curiosity requires humility.
It really does.
It does. It requires me to say, wait a minute, what am I doing here that's wrong? Where am I not showing up as my best self? And not just pointing the finger the whole time at your spouse and saying, wait a minute, it's you with the problem, and look how you show up, and getting into all this resentment.
Yes, it is hard. And that's one way that you can figure out these power dynamics and if things are equal is if you will look at your resentments, because some of them are valid and some of them come out from this overprotecting yourself a little bit. I have to tell you a funny example, and I haven't got permission from my husband, so I'll have to get permission later. So when my husband works overtime or has big work to do, he will get up really early, like at 4:30 in the morning. And we, one of the things I tell couples is spend the last hour of the day together. And we always do that, and it's our favorite time together. But if he's really tired, he wanted to go to bed, and gosh, I couldn't watch my TV program with him, right? And as I didn't even notice, because this is how we work, I went to bed, and all of a sudden my brain, and I say my brain, starts kind of shooting arrows at him, like, poor me, when you are in poor me. But I understand how the nervous system and how the brain works. The brain overprotects, and it loves to go to that poor me place. And so I notice that, right? But the thing is that notice, I can tell myself, oh, Kim, right? Your brain thinks it's dangerous. You can't finish your TV show, right? And when I can recognize that, I can soothe myself. In a one-person system, I can say, I love you, I got you, you're great, and he's great, and he loves you too, right? And we're okay. But this is important. If my husband pretend like he said, and so he doesn't even know that happened, by the way.
So wait, you just said in a one-person system, you can soothe yourself. So in that moment, he was asleep. He didn't even know you were mad, right?
Exactly.
But you're going, I am not okay. And in your mind, you're criticizing him and you're resentful, right? But you're saying, okay, now I'm back to a one-person system and I've got to do some work around my own feelings of being a victim here and feeling angry at him.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
And the tricky part is say if my husband had said something insensitive right before we went to bed, my brain would do the same thing. So it would, but this time it would be more valid. I may have to bring something up to him, right? But until I figure out with some curiosity what's going on, no judgment, because again, brains are funny. We think we come up with our own thoughts. Our brain does. And it's based on a lot of times on going into that fear part, right? And our brain comes up with them. But how I engage with my thoughts, that's me.
Yep.
That's not my brain.
Yeah.
That's me. I can choose to really get in there, or I can choose and believe that it's really dangerous and my husband was terrible for wanting to go to bed early. Or, I can soothe myself and just recognize what's happening and soothe myself and be okay and go to bed. Right. And not
wake up angry and have him ultra confused as to what happened. And he just went to bed. He didn't know anything happened. Right. So in situations where one partner feels unheard, is it usually a communication problem, a power imbalance, or is it something deeper?
Boy, it can be kind of everything. So when we come into marriage, some people really don't feel like they have a voice. They feel like in order for the relationship to work, the other person has to take up all the space. I have to let them take up all the space, right? And then I don't say things. So I'll have a lot of couples who maybe one person takes up too much space in the relationship, but they don't recognize that because the other person never had the courage to tell them. So they're just operating on what they're used to, and they don't realize that, right? And then you can have somebody who just takes up too much space, right? Let me give you some examples of this. So for instance, if one person just tells the other person what their schedule looks like on a weekend, hey, this is what I'm going to go do, right? They're used to just doing what they want to do and not checking in and not having collaboration. And so they're taking up too much space, but they may not recognize that they take up too much space, right? And so especially if you have kids, because your free time requires the other person to be taking care of the kids, right? Yeah. So you're going to collaborate on that free time. But just not letting your partner know what's happening with your time, what's happening when you get home after work, it's taking up too much space, right? And so you're a little bit entitled. And so when you're entitled, now I've got my hands and I've got one above the other, right? I'm feeling more entitled. So I feel like I can do this, but I could be doing that completely unaware. And if the other person doesn't come up and say, hey, this doesn't work for me because I was expecting this and I got this. And then again, the more you bring this up, the more that couples know each other better and they figure out how to do this better. But another way we can take up too much space, if I notice that I'm doing all the complaining in the relationship, I don't understand that I kind of don't understand that I probably have things that my partner could complain about as well. Does that make sense? And so if I see my partner as the main problem, I'm probably taking up too much space because I don't consider my own impact. I just see their impact on me and I don't see my impact on them. So I'm taking that high ground, which is taking up too much space.
Taking up too much space in the relationship. That's an interesting concept, because sometimes if a person is not feeling seen or heard, what is their way of managing that? Just complain and get resentful and whatever, right? But you're saying, wait a minute, that's actually just taking up more space in the relationship versus getting what you want. And what I'm hearing is that it's really important to, one, be self-aware. right?
Really
What's
is.
going on for me? Why am I feeling this way? And then 2, having the courage to actually say, wait a minute, when you didn't share with me your schedule, I didn't feel seen or heard. I didn't feel like you cared about me at that moment. I mean, that is hard, especially if you have some dynamics in the relationship that you go, you know what, I'm not going to say that to him or her because they'll just criticize me or they'll get defensive, right? So how do you get over that? How do you say, okay, I'm going to be aware enough to know how much space I'm taking, but more than that, how do I say to my partner, this is hard for me. What you did or did not do there was painful. And you can't control the outcome or how the partner's going to respond. So what are your thoughts on that?
I come back to a word of respect. When you're in this equal partnership, equality means respect. I feel respect for myself and I feel respect for the other person, right? And so if I don't feel like I'm getting that respect and I'm trying to be respectful when I bring it up, I need to kind of require it. I call this with my couples, you need to require it. But you can still do this in this respectful way. It looks like, I'm sorry, this doesn't work for me in relationship. And the best you can explain why it doesn't work for you, why it won't work for me. I can't keep the respect that I have for myself when this is going on. I'm making it more about me instead of blaming the other person. But it's inferred that,
for sure, yes,
that what they're doing is not okay. But I'm staying careful to keep that respect for them and for myself. And like I say, it is something that we're all going to have to learn. And the better that we learn this in a relationship, the more equality and freedom to be yourself, because you know that's going to be respected. Another big way is when I understand what my partner's burdens are in their life, what stresses them out, what's hard for them, what they're going through, and they understand that for me, we'll have respect for each other's burdens and we won't trample all over them on accident. Does that make sense? Because so it's just keeping that respect and care for each other's burdens, slowing down so that we're not reactive, right? So that whenever we do have to bring things up. So I'll say this to couples, that behind every complaint is a wish. So it's much better to say what you wish instead of what you complain. Like, gosh, I would really love it if this could happen in our relationship. And you make that feel like it's a win-win for each other. Like it'd be good for both of us, right?
Yes. Behind every complaint is a wish. Behind every complaint is a wish. Gosh, if we could all see that, doesn't that change bad behavior or, a complaining spouse or a complaining child? Like, wait a minute, there's an unmet need there. There's something else going on deeper. And it's not just they're complaining to complain. There's actually something there that to me makes me just go, oh, wait a minute, just stop for a second, because there's something else going on there. And to just offer some compassion. As I hear that, I think that's what that feels like. So, Kim, are there any strategies that you could leave us with that couples can use to ensure both parties feel equally heard, especially in high stress situations? I think, again, day-to-day stuff's one thing, but high stress or things that are really important, it's like, okay, everything can go out the window and, we become our worst selves. What does that look like? What are some strategies?
Sure. A couple of things is the ability to self-confront. Okay, so when we have, some people we'll call it an avoidant insecure attachment or an anxious. When we show up not great, there is an indulgence that feels good. So when you can just be like, pour me, and in your brain you're just throwing at the darts at your partner, we're doing that because in an indulgent way it feels like self-care to ourselves, right?
Why?
Don't ask me, but we all do it, right? Like when I can go in there, I can't believe they didn't see me and they shouldn't have done this and this wasn't okay. It makes me feel seen in this way.
Right.
That makes me maybe feel cared for, but not in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And we can recognize that we all do that and it's not helpful, and we can still get the care we need, but for that self-compassion. When I can be, that did hurt. and I can be more like, ouch, and just sit with that and like, what do I need from my partner? How could I ask for my partner? And I don't go into that indulgent, critical, crabby place in my brain, which my brain wants to do, right? That is going to be helpful. So when you can self-confront when you're going to that indulgence, pity place, complaining place, instead of helpful, mutual, maybe they have a part, maybe I have a part. When you can recognize that when you don't have a voice, then it's going to take you some courage to figure out how to do that and how to do that. So you might need some therapy to help you with that one. Let's see. In pack therapy, he always talks about there's two bosses.
Kim, explain what pack therapy is.
Sorry, it's just the name of the pack. Some people do EFT therapy, and again, most couples therapy do a little bit of both. But
it's a type of therapy.
Yes, and yes, the type of therapy will take. There's two bosses in the relationship, meaning that. Not only are we equal, but we're both bosses. We're both leaders, right? And we're both the king and the queen. And we want people to retain that position. We want you to be a leader. I want my spouse to have that equal say. They want me to have that equal say. So when you recognize there's two bosses, I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read some of these that I've written down. Again, part of that, figure out why you're trying to get power, because there is sort of that benefit that doesn't benefit the relationship, but you're going for that because it feels good to take the power. If you don't feel like if you have power, it's just such this place to want to go grab it rather than go back to that where we both get the power instead of just grabbing the power for myself.
Wouldn't you think that we're trying to get power because we are worried we're not going to have it? So if I grab something and I'm holding on to it tightly, well, it's because I'm afraid that if I let go of it, it's going to be gone.
Right.
Right. So as you're saying that, I think, gosh, it comes back to safety in the relationship. And as you were talking, I thought, self-confronting requires humble introspection. And that's hard to look at ourselves and say, okay, where am I falling short here? Where am I getting into victim mode and just blaming and criticizing and complaining? Where am I trying to grab power? Instead of just pointing, it's so much easier to just look at our partner and say, well, look at them. That's what they're doing. And to actually say, what is my role and what is my part in this?
Yes. And just like you said, both the being too critical is I'm being right, so I'm one up. But being the victim is one down, and that also grabs power, even though it's a one down, because I can't do anything about it. I'm just a victim.
Yep.
Right? So they're both power moves, which we don't want to make. And so sometimes when I am feeling, unseen, unheard in my relationships, I check out both sides of those spectrums, right? I say, okay, could I be going in this victim place where I don't see their side or my part? Or could I be going to this, place where I'm being too logical and only seeing my part, or I'm, I check out both sides of the spectrum just to be sure I'm shooting for the middle. Yeah. Right. It's great. Again, slow down so that whatever you got to bring up, you're bringing up in a safe way.
I love it. I think those are really important things. And Kim, I just want to go through a couple of the nuggets that we talked about and that you shared. And one is to just slow down and get curious about what's going on for us. And when you talked about that situation with your husband, that you were able to say, wait a minute, hold on. I'm not okay. And I'm feeling really critical as he's laying there in bed. I just need to slow down and do some self-care and recognize.
Yeah, I didn't bypass my feelings.
Right.
Even though they were totally irrational.
Right. No, you acknowledged them, right? And then did some regulating things to help you get into a better place. So slowing down, but that requires slowing down. Also understanding that we're going from a one-person system to a two-person system. And, I was thinking that'd be a great way to start marriage. But boy, you could be 30 years into marriage and go, wait a minute, I've been operating a one-person system and this is actually a two-person system. So it's never too late to change that perspective. I love the idea of being learners, both of you being learners, because that does put the power dynamic equal. right?
Sometimes I call that being creators.
Yeah.
So when you have more of a secure attachment, you see yourself, you don't see problems as such a big deal because you can create solutions.
Yes.
And again, you usually have a history of being able to do this well, so you have more confidence, right? If you don't have this history where you're taking power moves, right? You're trying to go one up or you're going one down. You don't have that history to have that same confidence. But because you're two adults who care about each other, you can do it.
Yep, you can do it. Absolutely. Have confidence in that. I love that we're both creators, right? Not one is a creator and the other one is just a receiver, but no, we're both actually creating this relationship and we're both responsible, right? Being responsible for your own emotions, right? Recognizing what's going on and being responsible for them.
Again, if you're responsible, you figure out what's going on with yourself and the one thing you need from your partner. So I'll tell partners, don't go global. Like my whole relationship, they're always this way. A partner cannot be mutual and collaborative with you if you do that. But when you can take responsibility for your own emotions and then you figure out the one thing you need with them, then you share that, they're generally like, yeah, I can do that.
Isn't that so true? I think of that same thing. Like you give me one request, it's fine, but you give me a list and I'm like, it's just overwhelming and daunting. My husband says, give me 3 max, and that's any to-dos or whatever. So I would think, all right, give them one thing, right? That you said, this is what would help me in this situation. Taking up too much space in marriage. I think that's a really interesting concept, recognizing, am I taking up too much space in marriage? Or frankly, am I not actually showing up in marriage? Am I not an equal partner in this?
Sometimes when you take up too much space, it's because you don't believe you can take up normal space.
Yes.
If you don't feel like you can have regular emotional needs and that you can take up just the normal space, I always use a bench. There's enough room for both of us on the bench. Then you will kind of rebel and you'll take up too much space. You'll have regulation issues. You'll get mad too easily.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Isn't that interesting? A person that's taking up too much is often because they don't feel like they can take up any. Ironic, but it makes sense, right? And I want to remember this, behind every complaint is a wish. Boy, that changes the way that I see complaints. I even think about that in my life in general. A complaint is often a wish and then maybe an unmet need that a person's not feeling seen or heard. That's really where that comes from.
And when you get complainy, you're in that indulgent space, trying to get some self-care in that not helpful place. When you can give yourself real care and real love with compassion and care.
Yep, that makes sense. Well, Kim, thanks so much for your time and insights. Feeling seen and heard in a marriage is paramount to having a connected and well-established relationship. And I appreciate your insights here. Something that I'm sure every relationship goes through or will go through. And so all of these tips I think are so important and valuable. Remember, if you have questions, go to our show notes or go to the therapeutic website. Remember, no question is off limits. Thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, take care.